Hi everyone! Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Ali. I'm an illustrator and 2D animator for motion graphics, and I draw in my free time. I've been a professional doodler since I was a kid and started digital art in the beginning of 2019. There's so much more for me to learn and improve on, but I just wanted to share some tips and advice so maybe you won't have as hard a time as I did when I first started. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you a bunch of tips to get better at digital art. I'll be putting a process video in the background, but if I talk about something specific and want to show you guys a demonstration, I'll drop those videos in between. So without further ado, let's get into the video. My first tip is, if you're just getting into digital art, know that you don't need super expensive equipments at all. Prior to me drawing daily on my iPad, I had a smaller Wacom tablet for school, and it wasn't a screen tablet. Nowadays, there are so many tablets that are budget-friendly and honestly still hold up to industry standards. Wacom is the leading brand for tablets in the industry, but other brands like XP Pen, Huion, Kodak, and many more brands are catching up and still very good in quality. Huion recently sent me one of their tablets and I loved using it just as much as my Wacom. And it was only half the price. So if you're just starting out and don't want to invest too much, look at your cheaper alternatives, or buying it used can help ease you in. Also, speaking on prices, you don't need top-tier programs either. Industry standard is Photoshop at the moment, but again, if you're just starting out, there's a lot of drawing programs that are either cheaper or actually free. Some of those programs are GIMP, Krita, Clip Studio, and if you happen to own an iPad, Procreate is super amazing. I primarily used Procreate for drawing since 2019, and used Photoshop for my professional job. So before even starting in digital art, I would just try to figure out what your budget is and know that there are so many options out there if you want to get started. Maybe you can start small if you're not too sure, and then work your way up and upgrade as time goes on when you find that you really do like digital art. My second tip is, get used to only 1 or 2 brushes. One of the first things I did and see a lot of new digital artists do is that they get so excited by the endless tools and stock up on all the brushes. Whether it's because we think more brushes means more skill, or we think that this or that brush looks really pretty, to be honest, all of that is excessive. Don't hoard brushes. After the frustration with trying out all the brushes, I finally realized there wasn't going to be this one magical brush that all of a sudden made my art look beautiful. So I narrowed down to using 1 brush. I needed to clear the clutter and really learn one tool at a time. I used a super fluffy brush for literally everything for at least the first year of me trying out digital art. When I made the fluffy brush bigger, I was able to put down a lot of color at once. And when I made the fluffy brush smaller, I was able to somewhat get sharp lines and clean up the edges. This brush also had a soft edge to begin with, so it really helped me ease into blending and mixing colors digitally. After I was able to manipulate that brush pretty effectively, then I moved on to other brushes. But honestly, just that process of getting to really understand the tool I was using was way more valuable than buying all the brushes that I wouldn't have time to try out and understand. Having said that, I do believe that after you have a sense of how brushes work in digital art, you can then find brushes that are more suited to your workflow. Because not all artists work the same, and not all brushes work the same. That's why in my own Procreate brush set on Etsy, I narrowed it down to 9 specific brushes that I would be able to create any effect and texture with. It was important for me to make my brushes more intuitive and bring that natural drawing feel back into digital art. I'll link that down below in the description if you're interested in checking out my brush set. Tip 3. Get familiar with your keyboard shortcuts. This is a tip that I haven't seen go around YouTube much actually, but I believe it's one of the most important. So typically, you can find the default keyboard shortcuts in the top menu under Edit and then Keyboard Shortcuts. Or it varies in different programs, but most likely it'll be somewhere in the menus. The idea of changing the default keyboard shortcuts is to change what button on your keyboard activates what tools in the program. If you were painting in real life, you wouldn't have your paints in one corner of the room and then your brushes in another corner. That just doesn't make sense. This is the same concept with changing the keyboard shortcuts. For me, I usually have one hand on the keyboard and one hand to draw. When drawing for long periods of time, I'm not really wanting to look back and forth between my keyboard and screen, which takes me out of my focus of drawing and it's just not very effective. My shortcuts are made in a way where I honestly never even have to lift up my hand away from the WASD hand position on the keyboard. This will take some time in the beginning for you to figure out your own workflow and to understand what tools in the program you're actually going to be using, because you don't want to set up unnecessary keys that are just going to take up space, and soon you will find out you'll end up needing those keys for tools you use regularly. So it's best not to set up things you don't use. If you're using Procreate, that app also has a similar feature to keyboard shortcuts called the quick menu. You can find and customize those when you go to Procreate, click on the Actions tab on the top, which has a little wrench icon, and then go to the Preference tab, then Gesture Controls. You should see Quick Menu in one of those tabs. You can change how you activate that menu. You can also set up what those actions will be once you activate them. You can customize them by activating the Quick Menu and clicking and holding down whichever action you are trying to change. As you can see, there are a lot of options that you can choose from. And an extra tip here, you can actually set up more than one menu by clicking in the middle. So I have two menus set up. One is for when I'm painting and one is for when I'm animating. If you guys are interested, let me know. I'd be happy to share an in-depth video about my keyboard shortcuts in Photoshop, Clip Studio, and Procreate. Tip 4. Use the Navigator and Reference tab. This little window can be used in any program. Again, this option will be in the menus, probably under Windows. On Photoshop and Clip Studio, it's called Navigator, and on Procreate, it's called the Reference tab. This feature is really important because drawing digitally allows you to zoom in and get in all the details. But sometimes you aren't able to see the full image, or you just forget to zoom out while drawing. This navigator helps in showing you that sometimes all the little details you're adding and spending hours rendering aren't really helping or changing your drawing in a positive way. In general, this little window just makes sure that your drawing stays on track and that your efforts are going in the right place. Tip 5. Use the unlimited resources that are available with digital art, such as editing, hue and saturation, contrast, different photo effects, and so much more, which I can talk more in depth about in another video if you guys are interested. But for now, the most effective tip that you can start doing is to flip the canvas, and do it a lot. Oftentimes when we are working on a drawing, we look at it for so long that we don't notice mistakes or things that seem off. Flipping the canvas also allows you to look at it with fresh eyes. I can't tell you the amount of times I thought a drawing was going well until I flipped the image, so make sure to set flipping the canvas as one of your keyboard shortcuts so you can easily flip your canvas back and forth without interrupting your workflow. And final tip, don't be too timid. There's an undo button. Digital art has limitless possibilities, and I know sometimes that can seem overwhelming. But remember that you can always undo something if you don't like the stroke or effect. You can even create a whole new layer to add a bunch of stuff, and if you don't like where it's going, just delete that layer and you don't lose the whole painting. I guess what I'm saying is, don't be afraid to get in there and experiment. That's it for this video, guys. So if you enjoyed the video, please like and leave a comment if this was helpful, if you try any of these tips, or what types of videos you'd like to see from me in the future. Thanks for sticking to the end, and I'll see you next time. Bye!